All right, greetings and welcome, everyone. This is episode 3 of the Driving Loaded podcast. I am Felipe Peters, one of your hosts, and our other host, Jordan Hillstrom, is on the other end of the country with a very special guest today, a guy that we served with. I have a little bit more time serving with Tony than Jordan does, but he is our guest for today, and I want to bring it over to them to say hi.
Morning.
Good morning, Petey.
So something that I kind of want to throw out early on in this segment is that Pete and I have been kind of talking about, how our paths crossed and kind of where we fit into the world in general. And, Veterans Day is coming up, and I told Pete, I'm like, so often since I got out of the military, like Veterans Day is a cool day, but it's pretty lofty in nature. Like, you thank some veterans, but you really don't, do you really like own that and honor anybody in the process? You might even go to a event or whatever, but you kind of leave and nothing really changed inside. You didn't give back, you didn't pour back into the community, and for whatever reason recently it's been shifting in my mind to be more intentional behind these kind of holidays to actually honor somebody in the process. So I asked Pete, and I'm like, hey, we obviously both know a great deal of veterans. Is there anybody in your mind right now that just really stands out that transitioned from the military and is honoring like his service well and walking a good life post-military? And immediately he threw some names out there, Tony being one of them. So, just it happened to be that, I knew who he was. We served together for a little while. So it was interesting, and, obviously being someone we can drive to meet and whatnot to do a podcast. So that was a cool connection. So I appreciate, you coming in or, allowing us to take an hour or two of your time this morning. And so as we started talking, I'm like, it'd be kind of cool to, once we started chatting on that, to get a present and honor somebody in the process. And so Pete and I put the last couple nickels and quarters we had, and sorry for the background noise here, everybody.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
So we got you a little decor. I don't know if it'll fit in here or you put it at your house. Either way, this is a gift from all the veterans that we know that are on our podcast, and to Tony Brooks and company.
This is legit. I can use it as a weapon as well.
Right, this is dang truth. Sorry for the
That's
wrapping.
like a good spot for me.
Perfect. So I've seen them where they put them in boxes, and they have like lighting behind it too, so it kind of pops.
Yeah, that's great.
So either way, it's
I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, I saw this and I thought, you know what? So often you buy gifts to check a box, and when I saw this, I'm like, this is meaningful to me. So I thought, it'd be
And Snuffy approves.
Snuffy approves. This is great. This is good.
Yeah, and speaking of Snuffy, actually, I got to pick mine up either today or actually Monday. I'm going to pick up my Snuffy because the guy is here at Regiment, so I'll just go over and meet him and pick up my little Snuffy.
There you go.
Perfect.
I pulled a good Snuffy move when I first opened the box. I dropped him on the ground and broke him off at the ankles. Pretty typical of a Ranger move, right? Break him off at the ankles.
Yeah, that's day one. So we'll go right into it. Tony Brooks, Dr. Tony Brooks, actually. So just give us a real quick rundown of where you're from, who you are. Your little bit of your military background. We'll delve a little bit more into that later, but just give us kind of the highlights up to the point where you are today.
Yeah, so I'm actually originally from California. I grew up in the Sacramento Valley in a little town called Roseville. Pretty normal middle class childhood. Had a great family life. Did really well in school. Ended up leaving Roseville to the University of Arizona in Tucson. And that was in the year 2001. And we all know what happened that year.
Yes.
I was actually in my, I believe, second week in college, and 9/11 happened. So that kind of changed my path pretty quickly.
How old were you then?
I was 19 years old.
Okay.
Freshman in college. I never really thought about the military, to be honest.
Any family in the military prior?
Grandfathers,
Okay.
both. But no direct connection, really. So 9/11 happens. I called my dad probably that same week and told him, I think I'm going to leave college and go join the military. He convinced me not to. He said, why don't you get through the end of your first year of college and then make that decision? Because 19-year-old, you're not exactly a strategic long-term thinker at that point.
We're idiots at that age.
It was exactly, and we'll get into that probably a little later. After being convinced by my dad to not join the military or wait it out a little bit until my emotions died down, got to the end of the year and still wanted to join the military.
Were you piss and vinegar like as a 19-year-old kid? Were you like angry? Like what was your kind of demeanor in life? Just you're obviously a laid back, chill individual right now, but a lot can change in a few years. So
I was a wild one.
Okay.
I was. PD could probably attest to this once I got to battalion, but I liked to party and I like to have fun. I'm pretty laid back, but I was the guy that liked to have fun. But somehow I did well in school. I don't know. I don't know how that works, but it did. I was never really angry. I was angry when 9/11 happened, but that was like a visceral type kind of response.
Sure.
Most of the time, just laid back. It takes a lot to piss me off.
You shake a country, though. That might rattle a couple of bees out of that hive, though.
It did. And you're looking at a few examples sitting right here. So
yeah. I was in 8th grade when that happened. Pete kind of went over this the other week, but that's literally in 8th grade when that happened. It was in my mind. It triggered like, okay, now I've got a few years to wait out, but in my mind I was done. Like I had to join. And it was literally like as if it was going to happen tomorrow. So I can attest to that for sure.
Yeah, it changed everything. It changed the game. It wasn't about college anymore. It was about how can I get into the military?
Yeah.
What's the best path? And shortly thereafter was, I think, the end of my first year of college. I couldn't get directly in the military because there was a waiting period because of the contract I wanted, which was the Option 40 contract to be eligible for the Ranger Indoctrination Program.
Okay.
So I had one more semester basically I had to get through before I could ship off, and that's when Black Hawk Down came out.
Oof, that was
another influencer, right?
Yes.
So after Black Hawk Down, then shortly thereafter was Pat Tillman incident. My path was pretty much, I'm going to be a Ranger. That's the only thing I'll settle for. Come early 2004? Was that when we were in basic?
Yeah, so it was February 2004, and I'll interject as far as Pat Tillman. I remember where I was standing, and when it was said to us, when we were told that Pat Tillman died, we were Alpha Company 254, mailed foot, whatever it was. Heard about Tillman. We were in basic training.
Yeah, I mean, the driver to get to the Army started with Pat Tillman leaving the NFL, right? And that was a huge driver. And then, of course, we were in basic training, got the news. I think all of us were pretty devastated because there were a lot of us with Ranger contracts in that unit. I don't think you didn't have one, did you, Petey?
No, and I was trying
We convinced you.
He wasn't that smart yet. We had to give him a couple of years, eh?
No, I'm not. I'm still not smart. No, I think I told Jordan this story. I switched with, you remember Raspberry? That short little kid that weighed maybe 100 pounds with his boots on?
I do.
I traded with him. I had a contract to go to Korea, and he had an option 40, and he didn't want to do it because he was, a little light in the loafers. And so I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. So, yeah, I didn't come in with the option 40, but thankfully the powers that be, they led me in a good direction. So, and I'm glad I was able to secure one of those.
So a question I had though, this is the stuff I like is like why option 40? So you had grandfathers in the military. Were they Ranger descent of any kind of origins, or like what drove you to Ranger contract, or was it the Tillman effect and the? I guess you were already in then, but Black Hawk Down, or what's?
Yeah, I think the first. My brother growing up would tell me always that Rangers were. He was a military historian as a kid, basically. So he would always tell me about Rangers and how great they were and what they were doing, and that definitely influenced me. I think
Sure.
I always had that in the back of my mind. I knew I couldn't swim very well, so the other special operations units were probably not in my future. You probably know who I'm talking about.
Navy SEAL.
We don't say their names around here too often, hey Pete?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. So, Ranger was the logical option, plus the Black Hawk Down, Pat Tillman. I was in Arizona, so he is elevated to a different level there. So it was a combination of all those things, I think.
Sure. Something I do want to bring up that in this Pat Tillman conversation, I also was influenced very strongly by what happened then, and I think what I was fed from the media to what truly transpired, and it doesn't take away anything of the heroics of who he is and what he brings to the table. Mm-hmm. But I also want to throw something out there, in the vein of this podcast, in this community that we're in, we put individuals on pedestals, forgetting that tons of other people lifted them up. The three of us in this conversation even did our part, but for some reason we refused to elevate each other to the appropriate to the magnitude we really should be. So we put guys like him on a pedestal because of where he came from, and he, I'm not taking away from what he brought to the table by any means,
right.
But I do think we could do a better job in our community lifting each other up just in general. So I hear these stories, and I people put him on a pedestal, and I stop and think how many good dudes that literally have either tried to lay down their life because they did things that are very heroic, but it wasn't their day, it wasn't their time. It doesn't make him any less heroic though at the end of the day.
No, I think you're right. I think now that I'm a little removed from the military, I think I put most of the guys in the 75th in on pedestal. I think all of them.
Sure.
I think they're all heroes. I wouldn't put myself up there with them, but I would put someone like Petey up there.
But
yeah,
why,
there he is.
But why? I guess that's the question: is why? And I get it. I'm the same way. But why are we that way? What makes us tick to where, I would put my life in front of yours and I would lay it down today because of the connection we have.
Yeah.
But why can't we lift ourselves up in that same regard?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think it's definitely probably a look in the mirror moment.
Sure.
We look at when you're in regiment, this. There's always someone better,
sure,
brighter,
sure,
faster, stronger than you, and I think that's why we always put other people on a pedestal.
Sure,
because we're always looking up, and that's the kind of the nature of that unit. Is it's great, and everyone there works their tail off to be there, and everyone wants to be better. So you're always looking up to that next guy.
Sure, no, that makes sense.
If you were in an organization where you were the best, I don't think you'd have much to look up to. What are you going to look up to?
No, that's a good point. I think a lot of the guys that I know, and to me it's spun with a negative, the derogatory nature of it is the narcissistic personality. I think it's got a bad stigma now, but I think it drove a lot of individuals to do like 9/11. How narcissistic do you think you are that you can solve the world's problems by joining the military? But nonetheless, that's who I was. I saw it happen. I'm what can I do to affect change? And I was in 8th grade. That's, to me, pretty narcissistic to think that I can make a change, but it's a good behavior.
As we're
responding, in a healthy manner.
Healthy narcissism, yes.
Yes, exactly. That's the way to put it.
I had the same thing. I thought that I was better than people around me.
Sure.
To the point where I got to go do this.
Yeah.
Who else is going to do it?
Yeah.
That was very narcissistic.
Yeah.
But someone's got to do it, right?
No, for sure. I just like the question of the why before the what.
Yeah.
If we never stop and actually try to break these things down, and you're clearly a lot more educated than Pete and I's brains times 6. That being said, I think asking, just stopping for a moment, and Pete and I have talked for hours now, and I know you guys have too. When you have those conversations and break things down, you can help maybe process things differently because you understand why you did what you did. So then going forward, you don't repeat negative history too. So that's kind of why I'm intrigued by these conversations. For me, that's the biggest takeaway usually.
Yeah, I would say that little bit of narcissism has carried me all the way through my life. I mean, every time I see something that gives me emotional, I'm thinking, what can I do to fix it? I have to be careful which documentaries I'm watching.
That's interesting.
Last night I was watching one on chocolate and sugar industries. They're horrible, and it made me mad. So, I think there's certain people that obviously are more narcissistic than the average, but it's definitely ingrained in a lot of us that were in battalion that we thought, hey, we can actually make a difference.
Sure. No, that's a good point. Have you post-military, even through you're going through school, and were you married when you were going through school?
Grad school, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even through that, starting a practice, there's a lot of different elements that were at play. So you obviously have a supportive, spouse in the whole process. Have you seen like your personality that drove you to the military and then post, like that interaction with your spouse? How does that play out in your everyday world with the way you? Cause I guess try to lay some framework for this conversation. So often, military individuals or very like type A personality people are fixers. So oftentimes that's not a good support role for a spouse. Sometimes they need support, not a fixer. So I guess in that role is kind of where I'm going is, how have you been successful being a supportive spouse versus fixing and that kind of stuff?
I think that's a great question for her. But
can dial a friend if we need to.
I know. But I would say, that's always a struggle. Is I do want to fix everything.
Sure.
I mean, that's what I do in my daily job. That's what I did in the military. That's pretty much what I do. Everything I do, I'm trying to fix things. So, yeah, they do need the support role, and it's not easy to turn off the fixer.
Sure.
But I've got a very, very strong wife. Petey knows her. She's
Yes,
very
I know her
strong-willed.
very well.
She's very... If she was a male, she would be probably in Ranger Battalion.
That's my wife too. She puts me in my place on a daily, and
that might be it. That might be that we attract very, very strong partners.
It's tough though, like because there's that someone's got to submit.
Yeah.
And submission's not a bad thing, but if someone doesn't, you both lose. And I've watched a lot of good families fall.
Yeah.
And you try to put the pieces together like in your mind, like why did it fail? And you're like, you start to see it's small, incremental, like every day, like you're trying to fix, and sometimes maybe you just got to stop and listen. And it was the small things that eventually eroded enough away that all of a sudden there's no foundation left. Yeah. So that's why this kind of stuff is interesting.
No, I think my profession has actually helped me with that, because that's my job. I have to listen.
Sure.
So that's taught me, honestly, to be a better listener.
Sure.
Because how many times have you gone to the doctor where it feels like they're not listening to you?
Yeah, they got their pen pad already, like trying to get a script for me, and I don't even want medicine. Like that's not my goal here. So I hear you.
Every time.
So listening is it's a hard skill. I mean, because again, doctors want to fix things, but I mean, listening. I think that's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. I've learned to be a better listener over the years. I have been divorced once, and so I know where I screwed up. I know the things that I did wrong, I did right, and I'm trying to correct those things and do better in my current marriage, and be the husband that my wife deserves. And she's very strong too. Very strong personality, but she somehow liked me for whatever reason. I'm not really sure yet. But she's the nicest person I've ever met in my entire life. So I don't know what I did to deserve that, but nonetheless, I will take it. I'm thankful that for her. So having that wife as your support, just like you have your support elements on target, back at the fob, wherever, back at your unit, doesn't matter. It's like having that support element is crucial. It's the key to success, really.
Yeah, I mean, my wife brings me down to reality on a daily. She's also my office manager. I bounce everything off of her, and when I get excited about something, she's going to be sure to keep me in check.
Like realistic?
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
yeah.
That's awesome. That's what I'm going to call my wife out in a good manner here, so when she hears this, I'll probably get yelled at. But so we have this company, right? We have like Pete and I have been trying to sell, and we have been successful, but it's not as fast as I was hoping. Like, everything's harder, and it's not that it's not a good thing and people don't need it, but it's not like you don't just get a lottery ticket, scratch it off, and win. So we were talking, and she's like, "Why are you doing this? Like, you should be out there selling your product." And I'm like, "Well, I'm trying. Like, it's not overnight, like a quick selling a hat at a store. It's a grind." But she's like, "Get out there and sell it." Like, very, like, just bold. And I'm like, it stung, but it checked me. Like, you're right. I didn't admit it right away to her because I'm still processing it. But like, I was losing in the moment, but winning long term. So I going back to your checking or keeping you within those like bounds of reality, it's important to have that structure.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, starting a business and getting out there it's slow. I mean, there are people that get the booming business right out of the gate, but that's not reality for 99% of small businesses.
Sure.
You start out by creating relationships. Those relationships grow. Business grows with it.
Sure.
It's a battle.
Yeah.
It's our battle back home, right?
Yeah. No, that's for sure.
So with that, that actually brings up a good question, Tony. So, it starts small. Like, how did you go about that? Because, I have those questions. I just got out of the Army a couple weeks ago, and I might get froggy one day and decide to start my own business. Obviously I can't just, wave the magic wand. There's a lot of hard work and research that goes into it. Like, I mean, how did you navigate that? Like, how did you know who to go to or who to talk to?
I basically looked at people that have done it. Who's successful, what I deem as successful, not what everyone else deems as successful.
Sure.
Because, some people say success is money, right? I don't think that's true. I think happiness is success. And sometimes that's money, sometimes that's having a good work-life balance, sometimes that's being able to take a vacation whenever you want.
So having real self-awareness of what drives that for you.
Yeah, so I found people that I thought were living how I wanted to live or similar, and I basically took advice from them. Built as many relationships as I could. Business is more about relationships than selling.
Sure.
If you have good relationships with people and you have something of value and you're able to articulate that value to them, the logical answer is to use your product or service, whatever it is. You don't need to physically sell it to them. They're going to run to you when they realize this is going to make my life better.
No, that's a good point, especially if like you have chiropractic clinics, probably 8 or 9 within a 10-mile radius. It probably more, honestly, but
more than that, yeah.
So
a lot more.
So there's clearly a need. So there's so much noise out there. So how do they cut through the noise to get to your clinic, and how do you, like, vice versa, cut through the noise to get them to come? And so I would totally agree with that relational piece. Understanding who your demographic you're going after, and how do you build relationships. You have to really, like, get back to the earlier comment about listening. Understanding what they need, who they are, why do they need to come to you versus somebody else. And I think there's a lot of good chiropractors, but it's a relational thing. You might know my body, like veterans. You understand veterans and the why they come in and they'll keep beating their body up and they won't stop. So you might practice with them different than somebody else, knowing that we're not going to listen probably as good to your instruction. We're going to beat our bodies up regardless of what you say. Mm-hmm. So you understand that, and you can help me, give me some safeguards for myself.
Right.
So that's good insight from.
Yeah, I mean, I get out of the community and I do as much as I can. I mean, helpful. I'm trying to be helpful, because when the time comes and that person finds out that they need your service or product, who are they going to go to? The guy that helped them, or the guy that has the best ad on Google?
That's a good point.
They're not going to go to the guy in the ad. Ads are great, but that's not what's going to drive them. They're going to drive towards the person who is most helpful to them.
Or you might get one visit with them, but because the relationship and the personality is not there, they're gone.
Yeah. I mean, the patients that get the best results in my clinic, I usually knew them before they came here.
Interesting.
And maybe years.
Do you how to phrase this? Do you think the way that you interact with people, because there's a trust factor involved, even for the patient receiving your care? I know I've had chiropractors that were probably good, but they didn't seem like they wanting to understand my body, what my body's needs were at the time. They just, the crack, snap, boom, what do they call that? Snap, crackle, pop type.
Yeah.
So when I left, I didn't feel like I really was getting the treatment, even after multiple sessions. Then you go to a different chiropractor that you have a relationship with, and it's almost like your body would receive the care you're getting faster. Yeah. So I don't know, if you could speak to that. I'm a little bit interested in that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I could have 10 chiropractors in a room, and you can get treated by them on different days, the very same treatment. But the person who connects with you personally the most is going to get the best results. I would say almost every time.
We were just talking, I called Pete about 2 hours ago, and I was driving up here, and we were talking about some other totally sidebar stuff, and VA in general, and the way that they treat, very black and white. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, and I'm not a doctor by any means, but to me, your mind, body, and spirit, they're all connected. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of what you're dealing with is almost in that lane of, there's a connection, there's a human connection.
Right.
And so your body responds to that human connection differently based off relationships. That's kind of what I'm gathering from this anyhow.
Absolutely. I mean, I have people that come in to me, they're coming to me for back pain usually.
Yeah.
Neck pain, headaches, something really mundane. And I'll spend 15 minutes talking to them about other stuff that may have led to their back pain. I've got moms that come in with maybe they've had 3 or 4 miscarriages, and they've never really told anybody. And I just sit there and listen. And now that's not necessarily, I'm not like a counselor.
Sure.
But being someone that actually cares to hear that story, I think is therapeutic in itself.
Sure.
And it's that connection again. If they feel safe enough to tell you their deepest, darkest, most disappointing moments of their life, and you're willing to actually sit and listen and not interject with, well, here's how I can help you.
Yeah.
No, you just listen.
Because I'm just throwing this out there, but what if the deep dark secrets we're talking about keep your muscles so tight and you're so bound just in nature, you're walking your jaw is clenched, your fists are balled, that's how your demeanor, your posture is. Mm-hmm. What if you can get that stuff out and all of a sudden you're able to relax and you're actually your body's stopping long enough to receive care? So I think there's a lot to that
absolutely
some doctors and chiropractors probably see differently, and the ones that would stop and see the relationship and not just a revolving door to get some money in and out of the QuickBooks, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I had someone in recently that told me they had the stress of diabetes. And I said, you know what? That's probably actually true.
And Pete's all the way over there in the Georgia, Alabama area, so it wasn't him, so that's good.
Yeah.
I got the stress of diabetes too, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real thing. I've had people quit their jobs. All that back and neck pain that we've been trying to work on, and I've been telling them, your back's moving good, your neck's moving good. What else is going on? They quit their job. Magically, they feel better.
Isn't that interesting? And it's not like the pain wasn't real.
No, it was real.
It's just crazy the disconnect though sometimes from stress management. But it goes back to your earlier comment, and we probably should go back to Pete's question. But the idea of listening and understanding what's going on, and self-awareness of what makes you happy. So if the body is important, but if you're not taking care of the mind and the stress, the work-life balance and that kind of stuff, true happiness is not going to be found. So you can make a ton of money, but what's the point if you're miserable in the process?
You got it.
Yeah, and that's my wife and I were talking about that last night. We went to dinner with some folks, and then went to a really awesome show where this band, they do all the Beatles songs. That's all they play is Beatles songs. But on the way home, that's what her and I were talking about. Part of my stress of diabetes, I guess, is I don't care enough about money to where I'm going to work 100 hours a week just so I can have money in my bank account, because I've been busy. I've had a high operational tempo, and time is a commodity, and I'd rather be able to pay my bills and then be there for my family versus being at work 24/7, stressing myself out, and being like, oh, okay, well, I made all this money. I think that focusing on the stress, that's trying to reduce that stress and trying to do things that are that make you happy, basically, extracurricular activities And that's something I'm having to learn right now, to turn off work.
Yeah, so I actually talk to people about this all the time, and they say, oh, I'm just not making enough money in my job, or, I don't have enough time with my family. And I have kids. I interview kids at the local high school for scholarships and things like that. And one of the things that always comes out is they want to do something they love for work. And I always sit them down and talk to them and say, hey, you don't necessarily have to love what you do for work. And they look at me, dumbfounded, like, what? It's like, yes, I do love what I do. But try this on for size. What if what you did for your work allowed you to do what you love?
Interesting.
So it's a different perspective, right? You either do what you love, or you do a job that allows you to do what you love. So look at the work as a means to do what you love. And I think that brings a different perspective to that hard work. And either way, you're doing what you love, right?
That's a great point. And I think my simple mind breaks it down to this. The grass is green where you water it. So every situation might not be ideal, but if you don't love the job, but you work 110% every day, and you're always giving more than you probably should be giving at that opportunity, it's going to be recognized in the process. And I think true enjoyment can come from fulfillment of even a job you don't like. But when you're giving 110% water in that grass, it's going to be green. Mm-hmm. And the opportunities are going to present themselves to you because of that. You might get the job you love.
Yep.
But especially when you're stuck in a job that you don't necessarily, it's like a rut, so you don't give 100% and you're always toxic when you come to work. I mean, are you going to expect something better to come out of your toxicity? No, it's going to be more toxicity. So that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so speaking of doing what you love, speaking of jobs and all that stuff, I don't remember if we talked about this when we were privates or whatever, but at what point did you say to yourself or come to the realization that, hey man, I'm going to be a chiropractor, that's what I'm going to do? Like, where I don't remember it, but maybe it was after you got out.
It was after I got out, and I was struggling. I was hurting. Every day I was hurting. And I couldn't find a solution. I went to orthopedists, I went to physical therapists. Everyone wanted to cut me open and explore, basically. And I felt like I was too young for that. I'm not quite ready to go the surgical route. I know it helps a lot of people. But I felt like if I do this now, what am I going to be doing in 10 years? My neck surgery? I'd rather wait. I'd rather push off that first one if I can. And Heidi actually is the one that pushed me into a chiropractor's office. And when I left, I felt so good. Again, that narcissism, I want to do this. So it was almost instant at that point. I actually changed my whole school path at that point.
What were you going to or going for prior?
It was actually in health and medicine.
Okay.
But I found that this path seemed more appealing to me. Because when someone comes into my office, I don't have that option to just, take out a prescription pad.
Sure.
And write something down and take care of that person. I have to actually use my hands, educate them on, nutrition and exercise. And that seemed like more of a challenge. And that's kind of the path I always take, the hard one.
Sure.
That may be an ingrained flaw.
Well, I think that all three of us share that same thing. We always pick the hard route. We chose that going to Ranger Regiment, going to Ranger School, doing all that stuff, continuing to serve. We chose that hard path. And, the world needs those kinds of people out there to set that example to them, and then go out into the community and be doctors, be lawyers, be whatever it is, car salesmen, be, to then not influence, but be the example that, other people can see, like, hey man, this guy, he's made a lot of hard choices in his life. And at the end of the day, he's trying to help people, through what he's learned. And I think that goes right back to you're really selling yourself versus your business. And then that person's going to come to you because you vested time into them and you listen to them. So that's what I just had going through my head as you were talking.
So I guess something that I'm interested in is when you chose that, like you transitioned in your mind because you were going to school already. Maybe back up from that even a second to say, like practically speaking, what steps did you take to even start school? When you got out of the military, was it right away? Did you tap into your GI Bill? Did you have a GI Bill? Like, what some of the practical things you did to succeed in that before you even transitioned?
Yeah, that was, I went straight to school with the GI Bill when I got out. I knew that I wanted to finish college.
Sure.
I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to help people. But yeah, I was waffling and kind of wavering back and forth between different things. I knew that people that get through college tend to have more options. So I was like, that's the logical first step. I'll figure it out along the way.
Sure.
And it did, through my own struggles, right?
So did you have a job while you went to school, or did you rely on the GI? Like, walk me through some of those steps. Like, what did you practically do to kind of make ends meet? And
yeah, I mean, I went straight into the GI Bill. I was with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. I did not work. I did do some lab, kind of didn't make much money.
Sure.
Just enough to get by, basically. I worked in a lab at University of Southern California.
Okay.
Which was really boring. I wouldn't recommend that to anybody.
So you go from blowing shit up to working in a lab with, I could see that not being a good transitional role for you.
Yeah, there were moments when I was in the lab, I'm like, I wonder if this would go boom if I put it in there.
Local news.
Yeah, so thankfully I didn't try it. Yeah, it was, I would say I didn't really have much of a path when we got out.
Sure.
I mean, as soon as I got out, I knew school was the next option, but it was pretty murky.
Yeah.
And it was scary.
We talked about this actually it was last week or whatnot. Pete and I were kind of going through some of the, even with the new business like that we're getting into, there's a lot of unknowns. And when I stop every once in a while and evaluate, like in the next month I have to get X, Y, Z done, it gets pretty daunting. Like you said, it gets scary. And something that we talked about is like, what do they teach you as a private in the military when you're doing, room clearing? You literally, you get to the room, you get to the door, you find your corner. You get one corner at a time. By the time, 20 minutes later, the whole compound is cleared. You didn't think about the whole compound. You thought about every corner. And that's something that I always go back to the fundamentals of life in general. But I use some of the keep it simple, stupid mentality because you can like scale that. You can start a business. You can become a doctor. Right. And it didn't come overnight. It was one corner at a time.
That's exactly it. It's one step at a time. Once I had that clarity at the end, I knew I wanted to be a chiropractor. All the stuff in between didn't matter. Just take the next step. I know where I'm going. But I know what the mission is. So how I got there didn't matter.
Sure, but you trusted the process, though.
You got it.
So that's something that I'm very intrigued by right now in our society in general. And going back to you talk to the kids at school about their career path and, I want to do what I love. And like we talked about, it's not a bad thing. But I think people get so caught in these grandiose ideas, becoming a millionaire and becoming famous and rich and all these things. And then it doesn't happen overnight and they get depressed. The Insta success doesn't happen. The Instagram account doesn't blow up. And so they don't have a process to rely on. And that's something I'm intrigued just generally of starting a conversation at even on a one-on-one level to say, what can we do in our local influence or circle of influence to help people and understand, like, how do we scale the military, keep it simple, stupid process? So when I talk to people, how do we get Joe Public that hasn't had that same training that I've had to understand that you don't have to have the whole thing figured out. You can cut, each day you can have 2 or 3 steps you put in place every day to help, replicate that success. So I guess just in general, do you have any advice as you went through school? You went through military to school, and then you obviously, you own your own practice now. Any practical steps you would say to anybody, not military, just in general, certain tools you used, and what mentality did you walk into school with, or to start a clinic, or just any practical tools you can help bring some clarity to the day to day on someone that's struggling right now that doesn't see past tomorrow.
Yeah, you got to look at the big picture. We all know what the end of this life is going to mean, right?
Sure.
Well, what do you want in the meantime?
Sure.
Do you want to travel? Do you want to have kids? Do you want to have a house? What is it that you want? Once you figure out what you want, then you can kind of start piecing together the puzzle. And it's not easy. There are times when you think you want something, and really you don't want that thing. And it's usually not a thing. It's more of like they want security. They don't want the house with the white picket fence. They want security. They want something they can come home to. But they're fixated on, I need this specific item. It's like, no, you just want security. So a lot of times it's backing up, and I have a good friend, he calls it the overview method. He basically says you need to back yourself off like you're an astronaut looking at Earth. You can't see the individual people. You can see these huge, large land masses and water masses, right? So don't think about that person. Think about the bigger vision.
So you can pull back from even like your circle, your city, your state. You can see like long term all of a sudden.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Because we get pigeonholed into these these narrow visions, right? Instead of pulling back and looking at, okay, what do I really want? Do I really want that new car?
That's a good point, and something that like military, non-military, you, especially when you're in the service and there's a lot of heat that's applied daily, whether it's training or combat, ranger school, whatever. When you have heat applied and you have a brother on each side of you, it's easy to walk through the heat. But now in civilian life, even doesn't matter who you are, there's heat applied on a daily basis. There's pressures and stressors that we have to deal with. So how do you deal with them? And I watch this in a lot of spousal conflict and just observing. And when you love somebody but there's friction, you end up fighting each other. And something that a counselor just told me recently is when you're dealing with that kind of stuff, you know the outcome, like you said, look long term. You know what the outcome, desired result is. Mm-hmm. How do you get there? So in the micro, you look at the daily conflict and how do you stop that? And he's like, you know what, for a second, if you can visualize yourself walking through life, literally like you're 10 feet above yourself and you're like a puppeteer and you're literally like telling your body what to do. So you're not feeling the pressure right now. You're making decisions objectively.
Correct.
So you're one step removed. And so he asked me a question, and the question was different the second time. In my mind, I was able to shift from like the emotional heat of the moment to, okay, well, what's the end result? Okay, we both want to get there, but we met some conflict in the middle, and we ended up attacking each other, or whatever, right? So some of these, I'm pulling some hypotheticals to prove the point, but the idea of what you're saying, like pull back to a space level, I didn't really take that approach yet, but even going 10 feet above your body and just retraining your mind to think, yes, there's going to be some heat in the process, but trust the process and try to pull the emotion out of it for a second and make more logical decisions.
Yeah.
And I think your buddy's approach is pretty sweet.
So I have 2 young kids, and I've actually, this is my wife that's done this. She always asks my son when he's having a conflict and he's having a fit, is that kind or helpful? She'll ask him that question. And almost every time he stops, no. And that's the end. It's unbelievable. But that's the same exercise is this going to get what you want by doing whatever you're doing right now? No. So we use it in our parenting. And I've been thinking about that every time that happens. I'm like, man, that's really powerful. Is that kind or helpful? Basically, is this going to help you meet your goal, or is this just noise? Is this just slowing everything down?
Sure.
It's quite interesting when you step back and get out of your own head sometimes.
No, for sure. There is. I mean, there's so many distractions, and they're not all bad. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have the time to stop and reflect and see some things objectively or through that filter, and that's where I was going, is kind of the lens and filters you apply to get the success. I think everybody has some good influence and bad influence. And I think if we can start pulling some of the bad, just slowly start weeding those gardens, you're going to see more of the success coming. But when you're so caught in the middle of it, it's hard to get out and see that until you pull back. Go to the space view, see what do the next 10 years look like? How do I get there? I think that's a good practical way to kind of look at, just especially guys transitioning in military, to look at that in that way. It's not so catastrophic to make that jump. Yeah,
I would say to anyone getting out of the military, you need to find people who are doing what you think is where you want to go, and you need mentors.
Sure.
You had mentors when you were in the Army or Navy or Air Force.
Sure.
Those were called team leaders and squad leaders, right? And that's what their job was, to mentor you to eventually take their position.
Sure.
So you need to find those in the civilian world, because you can't do it alone.
No, that's true.
Even though we feel most of the time like we are alone, you're not.
There's always someone struggling
Yeah.
just as bad as you are, if not worse.
Yep.
And that's a good point. So my wife, she's a great skier, but when I'm with her, she's not. If she has someone that's struggling worse than her, a little more fear than her, she's phenomenal at it. Because she doesn't see her own, like, she's paralyzed by fear when she doesn't like heights.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that gets her. But when she has someone we bring along with us that's not a great skier, that is struggling too, it's like my wife is just in her natural lane. And it's amazing. It doesn't take a lot, just a little bit to understand that. Someone struggling along with you, you get some perspective all of a sudden.
Right.
That's a good thought.
Yeah, all of us vets need to stick together. So when you get out, find a group of vets in your area, because we're all going through the same things.
Sure.
On different scales.
Did you stay connected when you got out, or did you kind of unplug for
I
a
actually
bit?
did unplug, and I think that was actually probably a mistake, because when I did get reconnected, everything was much easier.
I did the same thing when I got out of the military. I would have even threw stuff away that I'm pissed at myself for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
My wife even asked me, like, why are you, like, that's not a great idea. But in my mind, I had to separate for a while.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd have put it into a wall locker and locked the door instead of throwing it out, because you don't get some of that stuff back. But even relationships, it's almost the same way. It takes a while to rebuild, because it's you feel almost like you're like ostracized. Probably not the right word, but you feel cut off all of a sudden. Like you can't get back in the fold. You're never like kicked out of the fold, but in your mind you did, almost, in a sense.
Yeah, I know a lot of Rangers that I talk to. Everyone that gets out, whether it's retirement or after your first enlistment, second enlistment, they all feel guilty.
Interesting.
Every single one of them feels like I should still be there. I haven't met a single person that's left 75th Ranger Regiment that didn't have that feeling, like they left too early. Despite how they left, even if it was on bad terms, they still feel like they should be there helping. I had the feeling, I'm pretty sure PD probably is going through it right now, but
yes.
You know what? There is more, and there'll be people to follow you up and take your spot.
So I don't want to be that cliche guy, but like literally got goosebumps like hearing that, because that's something I've struggled with, but never actually never verbalized that thought of, you know, where did that come from? Why do I have this skill? But even identifying with it, like you talk to my wife about it, but she's like, you know, like you don't have to save the world. It's not your only responsibility. Like you did 3 deployments. That's more than like 98% of the world.
More than that.
It probably is, but the idea is I still feel guilty, but why? So he's just hearing that, like we talked about walking shoulder to shoulder, like I still have people to lean on. We haven't talked since we probably had, it's probably been when did you get out? What year?
It was it was 2008.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning of the year.
Over a decade ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, how easy it would have been to connect on the phone or text message or whatever. So yeah, that's crazy.
Yep. The guilt is real.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be the first one to admit that, leaving Ranger Regiment, leaving the Army, it's a very hard thing to do. I don't want to say it's harder at 16 years than it is at 4, but either way, it's a very hard thing to do, because it's done, it's over, and because now I have to find my way, and kind of leads into another question for you, Tony, because I'm trying to figure things out on my own right now as well. I don't know 100% what I'm going to do. Obviously, I'm working with Jordan, but still, I know that I need to do something. And from what I've read quite a few books even before I got out. Purpose, that's the key word, purpose. Where is my purpose? What is my purpose? How do I find my purpose? Because it's not going to be written on a wall. It's not going to be a text message. They're not going to mail it to you. It's, where is it? And I'm struggling to find that. And I try not to obsess about it, because that tends to, stress me out. So I just kind of trying to let things happen as they may at this point, and, go on with life. So how would you maybe not, you may not have that exact answer, but, how do you purpose?
I mean, I think most of us, if we look close enough, our purpose is right in front of our face. Or in my case, it was it was in my body. It was my back. My back was killing me. And once that was gone, it's like, aha. And I think most people have something in their life that's right in front of their face that they see every day or they do every day, and their purpose is there. They just haven't took the time to stand back and smell the roses, so to speak. It's a like you said, it's not going to be mailed to you. No one's going to point it out to you. Maybe a spouse might notice it and say, yeah, you say you don't have a purpose, but you always do this one thing, or you're always talking about this. That is your purpose.
And I guess I wonder too, like if we look at and we put purpose on a pedestal, what if purpose changes and it could be like a micro and a macro purpose? What if in the micro is taking care of your kids and being the best damn father you can be today?
Yeah.
Versus saving the world. Because what if that's what you need to do right now is be a good father, be a good husband, be present?
Yeah.
And I think even for myself, this is a struggle that I'm just getting over now, or it's still a process, but getting better at it is being present. You know, going back to the guilt. Like in your mind, you want to be there. So you can be 10 years removed, but that doesn't help. You might as well have just been yesterday when you got out. You know, you at the zoo, and I bring this example up. Being at the zoo with my wife and kids, and it's a beautiful day. I mean, it's phenomenal. Everything should be perfect. But my mind is like
wandering.
Way wandering. And it's not that I don't love my wife and kids. I do. Like I'm very blessed, and like it was like winning the lottery by having the family I have. To that point, though, why am I there and not feeling fulfilled? So I think your purpose in your mind could shift from, you know, day to day, and or, you know, like you have a goal to have your purpose is to start a nonprofit that's going to help transitioning veterans or whatever that would be. But then the daily purpose can be different too. So that's just something I've been kind of struggling through. But I think hearing some of these conversations really helps put things in a good perspective.
Yeah, I mean, being present is not always easy, as you just explained. For me, I think that's one of the things that I knew I had to work on, because my wife notices it when I'm not present, and I don't even have to be doing anything. I could be still playing with my kids, but she can tell like my mind's wandering. But I think getting better at that, just being present in whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, I mean, for Petey, it could be sitting on the toilet, right?
I do that a lot.
Yeah, be present, right?
Hey, no joke. I have no shame. I went to the doctor yesterday or the day before because they think I have IBS. So I don't know, man. I might be sitting on the toilet too much.
But, you know, to that point, though, you've talked a lot recently, Pete, about, you know, with your daughter even and some of the events that you're taking part in now, like that's a non-negotiable for you. So in your mind, you've purposed, like in your heart, like this is what I'm going to be, this is where I'm going to be, I'm going to be present. So like he'll tell me, hey, I'll talk to you later, I'm going to be doing this now. So I can see him making the mental shift that this is what I'm going to be doing, and I'm going to be start blocking other things out, which that's half the battle is like practically speaking, getting there, making sure your phone's on silent. Like there's practical steps you can take, but then there's the mind game that it's a little bit tougher to cut through that noise sometimes.
Oh, especially with a new business.
Yeah.
Your mind's always going to be wandering at the beginning. Like you said, blocking things out does wonders.
Sure.
My Thursday afternoons are completely my kids and my family.
That's cool.
So that's been like that since I opened my clinic, and that was in 2014.
Well, and the fact that your spouse works with you in the clinic too, like you can like intentionally take that time. You know, every Thursday it's a family day.
Mm-hmm.
That's to me, that's just kind of the practical stuff that I like to hear. To say, as a business owner, there's a lot of responsibilities and stress on your plate, and how do you find time and you know make sure that your family still feels valued in the process. And that's so hearing that kind of stuff is cool to hear that there are small things you can do to seemingly make a difference for that.
Yeah, I mean, I have people ask me all the time, "You're not open on Thursdays? Why aren't you open on Thursdays?" I said, "Well, I've decided that I don't work on Thursdays." Now, if I opened on Thursdays, would I make more money? Yeah, I probably would. Is that more valuable than getting that extra day every single week with my wife and my kids, not in the clinic? To me, it's more valuable.
that goes back to like success. That's successful to you because you want a good work-life balance and to manage stress and family relationships. Like that's important.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think it helps me be more present when I am in the clinic. When I come back to work on Fridays, I'm ready to go. Like everyone else is all like slothing into my clinic.
Thank God it's Friday. Like, oh,
yeah. Like, and I'm like, it's Friday?
Yeah. Huh.
The clock is hitting 7 p.m. and I'm like, where's everybody else? Oh yeah, we're closed. So, everyone's got their own way to do it.
Sure.
For me, it's a 4-day work week. It's actually 3.5 in my
hint, hint, Jordan. Hint, hint.
Yeah. Microsoft actually just tested this. They're actually moving to a 4-day work week.
So I wonder, like, the trickle-down effect, and you see companies like Microsoft, they employ, I don't know if it's 100,000 plus. I don't know how many people they employ, but a lot.
$60,000 just in Redmond alone.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like that's going to be a huge trickle effect on the economy, and I'm interested to see one life cycle away. Like I'm on board with this, even for schools. Practically speaking, the buses cost a lot of money to transport kids to and from. Mm-hmm. If we can add 20 minutes each day, be more practical with their time. How many